I mean, I feel stupid coming back to this deck over and over again, but it is quite frankly more interesting to tweak around with the ratios and Invoked Shaddoll a bit than to play Dragon Link as the best deck for the 5th consecutive format or whatever. But believe me, I don't only play Invoked Shaddoll, out of rebellion against Dragon Link. I also genuinely think that if you want to have a competitive chance in this format, I believe Invoked Shaddoll still a very solid pick. The list you're going to see in this video is the list I have felt quite comfortable with in high rated DB at the beginning of a format, and although a side note that obviously doesn't really mean a lot, especially in the beginning of a format, high rated DB, it's to take with a grain of salt, but you also have to take into account that Shaddoll is one of the decks that thrives the most when a format is already established, because it is sort of a deck that counters, or that at least tries to counter the meta more than dictated. That being said, let's get into the list. Also, by the way, the reason I think this deck is more viable than the Trap Shaddoll deck right now is because the Trap Shaddoll deck requires sort of a solidified format. It thrives from the fact when there are like 2 decks in the format that are like extremely popular combo decks like Drytron and Virtual World last format, and they can adapt their traps to the respective decks that are played. Right now, there are a lot of decks that can be played. The problem is that combo decks and control decks are both viable options in the format. Like, you can play Dinosaur, you can play Virtual World, you can play Dragon Link, but you could also play Eldritch or Invoke Dogmatica, and everything would be very fine. And I believe in an open format like this, the Alistair Invoked Shaddoll deck is better than the Trap Shaddoll deck because it has a higher ceiling, and in general, it's just more powerful in that sense. If the format solidifies and we know which decks are going to be played the most, I believe that, maybe we're going to come back to the Trap Shaddoll deck. But one thing we have to consider here is that we already, respect that the Ghost from the Past set is going to come out very soon. The Genius card and the HellShadoll Void are going to come out, and we're going to talk about HellShadoll Void after we're done with the deck. But, the Genius has made its way into the main deck. For the deck list, we played 3 Alistair, 3 Meltdown, and 2 Invocation. So the reason we don't play Terraforming in this list is because simply I didn't find any space. I wanted to keep this at 40, and with the new pot being in the game, you have to make space for this card to some degree. I feel like having Alistair is great, but also this card can clock quite a bit. 2 Invocation is also fine. I used to be a big fan of only playing 1, but that was in a format where the format was a lot more unhealthy with Infernoble, the Eldritch combo variants, as well as Dragon Link. This format, it's okay to play 2 Invocation. Usually you just want to be able to fusion summon. If you're able to do that, you're well into the game, and everything sort of gets rolling. Nadir Servant, 3 of that, obviously. Ecclesia and Fleur-de-Lis. I think that the ratio of these cards were the same in the last, iteration of this deck I showed off on the channel. This version, specifically the Invoked Shaddoll Dogmatica deck, really is more of an aggressive deck that can't really make use of punishment. And, the big question here would be, why do I not play punishment? I believe that it sort of conflicts with the strategy this deck is trying to go for. Oftentimes, you just want to be able to OTK with Mechaba, Fleur-de-Lis, as well as Ecclesia. And punishment also, conflicts with your own strategy. You want to fusion summon every turn with this deck. For the Shaddolls, we played 2 Wendy, 2 Squamata, 1 Beast, 1 Dragon, 1 Ariel, and 1 Genius. And this is a new card that is going to come out in Ghost from the Past, which says if it flips up, you can target a Shaddoll and it's unaffected by monster effects that turn. And if it's sent to the grave by card effect, you can target an effect monster on the field and can't activate its effects that turn. This card is obviously, and that is the first thought, obviously very, very good with Meltdown, because your opponent will not be able to react to this card's effect when it's used as a fusion summon. Also, if you make Abkalone with this, you can negate 2 monsters your opponent controls, so basically any combo board you can totally negate, which is very crazy. But a funny thing is also that you can, for example, negate your own construct so that you can deal a bit more damage if you want to. So I feel like this card has some neat implications. This card also lets us play the Shekinaga again, which is very, very good if you play against Zodiac, for example. And overall, I really think this card is okay. We exchanged this for the Hedgehog that we previously played, and I feel like Hedgehog never really, it wasn't really the best card. It was the most cuttable Shaddoll. So I will try this for the new format. Previously, I played 3 Wendy, 3 Squamata, cut down on 2/2 because I needed to find space for more non-engine cards that you really need in this format, and the pots. But it isn't too much of a problem because we also cut down the HellShadoll fusion to 1 copy only. I really only play this right now as a card that, if you want to have access to it, you can search it, you can mill it with your construct and get it back. But it's not a card that you really want to hard draw, or at least that you don't rely on hard drawing, which I find pretty good. With Pot of Prosperity in the game, and if you play Super Polymerization, you have enough ways to fusion summon. So this card is not as needed anymore, and Super Poly works in this format as a card that also breaks the opponent's boards. So that's what makes it really good. 3 Shaddoll Fusion, I think this is undisputable. 1 Schism, most broken card, obviously. And then we come to all the non-engine cards. And, you know, I partly discussed this already here. Pot of Prosperity, only 2 copies, because I really wanted to keep this deck at 40. I believe that's where it's the best. You want to draw the combination of Meltdown and the Shaddoll Fusion as much as possible. And Prosperity is a very good card, but I really don't want to reveal a Prosperity of Prosperity. And I know this is very bad reasoning, but it was I would say the card that I would be able to cut the most to 2 out of the deck, because all of the hand traps are, you know, they are mandatory 3 of. Phantasma is my favorite card of the format. It is broken against every single deck that is currently played. It is a card that the Dragon Link deck has to address usually very soon, because it protects you from the Dragonmaid Tidying, and it's a beat tick that you can run over the Heretic Seals with. So overall, this card is nuts, and it lets you have the hand of Shaddoll Fusion, Meltdown, and you know, a lot more often. Ash Blossom, you know, don't have to discuss this. Nibiru, I feel like Nibiru is in a weird spot right now. I felt like I lost too much or too consistently to Dragon Link, to the point where I wanted to keep Nibiru in. But I don't know. Maybe there's, you know, I think this is the most disputable card of the entire deck. And then 3 Super Poly, because this card is absolutely nuts. Like, you don't really play any targets for this card, even in your extra deck. Like, you'd say, like, generic targets. You really only use your Shaddoll monsters for the fusion summon. So you just normal summon a Shaddoll monster and go into your fusion. But usually that alone gives you so much advantage that you don't need, how they call, like, Starving Venom Dragon or the Dragostapelia plant dude. For the extra deck, we play 2 App Cologne, 3 Construct, 2 Winda, and 1 Shikinaga. This is nice because versus Zodiac or other Earth-based strategies, I feel like in the past, you couldn't really play this card. Wasn't, you know, you didn't really have any Earth monsters in this deck whatsoever. Now you have a consistent way to get to an Earth monster, which is genius. So, you know, just a nice option to have 1 Ogoatis and 1 Mechaba. Not a second Mechaba in this version, but, you know, it rarely comes up, so I don't find it too troublesome. 1 Artemis, 1 Gravity Controller, and then the, you know, Holy Trinity here. This is Cross Sheep, Celine, Access Code Talker, and this just lets you OTK in the most random scenarios where you would think you can OTK whatsoever. If you have 2 monsters and Schism up turn 3, you win, basically. For the side deck, there's a lot of playing around with these ratios. I feel like also this is a deck that changes every week. So, you know, next week you could, you know, text me on Duel Invoke and ask me how the current build is looking like, because I change these ratios all the time. Harpy's Feather does the 3 Cyclone, 3 Evenly. I believe that, you know, these are quite mandatory, the 4 here, but Evenly is, you know, sort of itchy, you could say. Evenly is one of these cards versus Invoked Dogmatica in the mirror match. This card is insane, can be insane versus Eldritch, and these are typically matchups that are harder to win for this deck, just because it becomes very sacky with Super Poly in the game if they happen to draw the right traps. It's just annoying. So evenly matched is quite good in that regard, and also versus Eldritch, it's better than Lightning Storm. 1 Pankratops, this card's insane in the format versus Dragon Link as well. 3 Lancia versus, you know, potentially Dragon Link, but mainly Dinosaur and Virtual World. 1 of the Shaddoll, I feel like in a slower matchup, you could potentially side this in. I honestly really like this card. I wish I could play it in the main deck, and I used to play it in the main deck, but currently I don't really see any space for it. And then 3 Summon Limit. This card is not going first, and this is also something that I figured out lately, is that Cosmic Cyclone has become one of the cards that everyone cites in general. So having a second win button versus any combo deck is quite strong. All in all, Summon Limit is one of these experiences that I'm, you know, currently trying out. Let's see if it works out. But that wraps up the deck list. One of the cards that hasn't found its way into the main deck is the HellShadoll Void card that's going to come out. I don't really feel like this card can contribute anything to the strategy or game plan of the specific deck I just showed off. I used to have plans with this card where you could make VFD very easily with Mechaba and it, because they're both level 9, and you could still go for Exceed rank plays with this card, but I don't really know if that's worth it, just to play an additional Shaddoll brick that, you know, doesn't really do anything in your hand other than being fusion material. I mean, I have loved the Invoked Shaddoll deck since the release of the Shaddoll Structure deck, and the evolution it has sort of gone through since then. Really would recommend you to play this deck as long as it's possible. I do believe that, maybe not believe, but I think it's not unlikely that they would hit maybe 1 or 2 cards on either the next or the ban list that comes after the next one. So on one of the next 2 lists. So have your fun with this deck a bit more, play it out in this format, really grind it out. It's a lot of fun. You can learn a lot while playing it. I believe technical play matters a lot. And it really just feels very satisfying to resolve a Shaddoll fusion on your opponent when they Dragon Link combo you. Anyway, for this video, this is going to be the end. I hope you guys loved it, and I'll see you in the next one.